too. And then welcome. Welcome. Okay. Welcome to the public hearing for the Finance Committee and the Planning Board. If you need to speak, please go to one of the microphones, give us your name and address, and then your questions. We're going to start out with the Planning Board taking two of the questions first, and I want to turn it over to Mr. Vanda.
Good evening. Article 2, see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws and the associated Table 1 principal use regulations as follows. 1, by allowing personal service shop 3.5.1010 to be permitted within the highway industrial district to read as follows. R10, no. R20, no. R60, no. 0?
No,
Okay.
it's an overlay.
The overlay.
Neighborhood business.
Neighborhood business, yes. General business, yes.
Central business.
Central business district, yes. General industry, no. Highway industrial, yes.
Light industrial.
Light industrial, no. Site plan review required. Or take any other action related thereto. Any?
This is a minor housekeeping article for the planning board. When we established the highway industrial zone, which is along Ballardvale Street and Fordham Road, it was the planning board's intent to allow personal service shops in that area. It was overlooked in the rezoning, so we're adding it in now.
Any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Bill
Please.
Mason, I live in Little Grove. Why are you doing this? I'm curious.
Personal service shops include barbers, hairdresser, and there is some retail proposed on Ballardvale Street, a retail strip between 200 Ballardvale Street and 210. They would like to be able to have a barber there or something like that, and right now they can't. So as we had intended to allow that anyway, when they came to us and pointed out the problem, the planning board decided that it would be a good proposal.
I personally feel we have too many shops today. Traffic is atrocious. It's just unbelievable that we're going to add more shops, or add more gas stations, all of these things that, I think the traffic is in the town is just, I live in South Wilmington. It takes me 5 minutes in the morning between 7 and 9 to get out of my street. 5 to 10 between 3 and 5. It's unbelievable, the traffic. And we keep adding. We're going to another article, and I'll speak on that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to Article 3. To see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws and associated zoning map of the town of Wilmington by voting to rezone from residential 20, R20, to general business, GB, the following described parcel of land, or take any other action related thereto. You also have the description on your sheet, and I will read it for the record. The land known as 276 Lowell Street, Wilmington, Mass., Assessors Map 72, Lot 1, more particularly described as follows. The land with the intersection of the southeastern boundary of land of Harley Jr. and Eleanor Towle with Lowell Street in said Wilmington, thence northerly by land of said Towle 180 and 12/100 feet, easterly by the land of John R. Marshall et Ux 131 and 63/100 feet, Southerly by the land of John R. Marshall, 180 and 0 feet, and westerly by said Lowell Street, 125 and 0 feet, to a point of the beginning. The said premises contains 23,097 square feet of land as shown on a plan entitled Plan of Land in Wilmington, surveyed for John R. Marshall and Dolores Marshall, December 1961, H. Kingman Abbott, surveyor, and the plan being recorded in the Middlesex North District Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 97, Plan 79A, as petitioned for by Kevin J. Brennan and others. Is the petitioner here?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Attorney Brian Corrigan, 20 Middlesex Avenue, on behalf of Mr. Brennan, the owner and petitioner who's here with me tonight. The petition is very straightforward, and just as an additional point of clarification for those who may not be familiar with the location, Mr. Brennan's home is the first residential property to the west of the Burger King and Shed lot on 129. As the map here indicates, Mr. Brennan's property is surrounded on two sides by a parcel that's zoned general business. That's the vacant lot with the shed retail operation, and then next to that is the Burger King property. So the reasons are obvious. Mr. Brennan is sort of the lone residence here, just about surrounded by commercial property, and so he's seeking to rezone his land for that purpose. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
What's the planned use for the property?
Well, Mr. Brennan is not a developer, so his intent would be to explore selling the property to someone who obviously would be looking to redevelop or develop the land around him.
Do they have a plan to develop?
Mr. Brennan has no plan himself and has not really explored any sale, but the writing seems to be on the wall for Mr. Brennan. It's no longer a suitable residential property for him, and so he wants to rezone and then explore a sale of the property to a commercial developer. That's what he wants to do.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Sir?
Does Mr. Brennan own the property of John Marshall?
Mr. Brennan owns the subject property that's described in the article.
Why would you use John Marshall?
Excuse me, sir?
Why would you use John Marshall's survey data? He's been deceased a while.
Oh, this plot of land was laid out back in 1961. At the time, apparently, Mr. Marshall and his wife, I presume, own the property. So it's very common in chains of title to refer to plans that are very old, and this one is not old at all. It goes back to 1961 when this land was this particular lot was created. So that's why it's...
Now, that to me is old, 1961.
Well, I do a fair amount of conveyancing work, and I've seen plans refer to over 100 years old.
I'm just a novice, and I'm just saying.
It's a legitimate question, but the fact of the matter is, Mr. Brennan is the sole owner of that property.
Oh, yes?
Yes.
You bought it off John?
I'm not sure. When did you buy the property, Kevin?
I got it from my parents, and they bought it from, I can't think, it wasn't Mr. Marshall, but they bought it in between.
The other question I have is, who is others? And petition by Kevin.
The petitioned article requires a number of signatures in order to be allowed for presentation at a town meeting, and that's what the others refers to, are those folks who signed the petition. And that information would be available in the town clerk's office if you needed to see it.
Well, the other question I have is, again, it's on the track. South Wilmington is inundated with traffic. But there are other houses beside Mr. Brennan. There's 1, 2, at least 4 or 5, 6. And it seems to me, if this article goes through, rumors is going to be a gas station. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. We don't need enough money, or we don't need a nail shop, or any of those things along. We've got enough traffic. Let the gentleman fix his house up and sell it. I don't see why this article should go through. There's no advantage to the neighbors. And the traffic is just so bad. I need to hop on it. It really is. And I think most of you live in town, you know how bad the traffic is. And there's no relief. And I don't think I should have 10 minutes to get out on my street in the morning. I think that's unconscionable. And my last shot is South Wilmington is going to look like 114 in Danvers if you rezone. And this will be sold, it'll develop a nail shop in there or something. And somebody buys that out right down the street. Thank you.
Any further questions from the audience? Thank you, Counsel. Whoop, you start.
I'm from Woodland Road also. This article was brought up a few years ago to be rezoned, the same piece of property, and it was turned down. And I don't believe that these people should be making residential area into business area. We have enough business where it belongs, not in the residential area.
Thank you. All set, Attorney? Thank you.
Okay, the planning board's going to adjourn to room 9. They'll take no further comments from the audience, but they will be voting tonight on these 2 articles. And we'll take a very short break while they leave, and we'll continue with Article 1.
No, I just say,
Sure.
I, as a resident, was surprised of a special town meeting, I think, to buy a church property. To me, that seems okay. These other 2 things, to me, I don't know, for a special town meeting, why would they get on the agenda? Why would they wait for the major town meeting?
You can, on the petition one, all you need is, I believe it's 10 signatures from residents to be able to put it on.
No, it's more than that for
Is it-
special.
Okay, once it's been declared a town meeting coming up, anyone can do it, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Containing approximately 7.86 acres, being more particularly shown as lots 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on that certain plan entitled Subdivision Plan of Land in Wilmington, dated February 7, 2008. Rated by Soco and Columbia Engineering Association and filed with the Middlesex County Registry District of Land Court as Plan number 4 246B in the town's planning and conservation fund, and further to see if the town will vote to appropriate, borrow pursuant to any applicable statute, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for such purposes, or take any other action related thereto. Mr. Hall.
Good evening. First of all, just let me apologize to the folks in the audience that this particular easel is facing away from you. The same information is actually on the easel across the room here. That's just an overview of the property itself. This particular parcel is the same parcel. It just happens to be a map of the property. Just by way of history, back in February of this year, late February, I received a call from the Archdiocese of Boston, a representative, inquiring as to whether the town would be interested in acquiring a portion of the St. Dorothy's property. And we really owe what amounts to a right of first refusal to the fact that Father Early, who is the pastor there, of both St. Thomas's and St. Dorothy's, had contacted the Archdiocese and had requested that when consideration came up about this property, that they give the town an opportunity to consider it first before it was put on the open market, so to speak. So we certainly owe him a great debt of gratitude. I brought this proposal to the Board of Selectmen. We had a number of discussions and really concluded that given the characteristics of this property, it made tremendous sense for us to attempt to acquire it. The property is high and dry, so to speak. It has access to two main roads, both Glen Road and Main Street, has access to water and sewer. So from the standpoint of buildable property or usable property, it's right there. And these types of properties really don't come around a lot, particularly now as a property continues to be developed and redeveloped in Wilmington. So the board instructed me to contact the representative from the Archdiocese and to pursue negotiations on arriving at a purchase price, which I did, and ultimately we arrived at a price of $1,725,000 to acquire this property. After arriving at that price, there was a purchase and sales agreement that was signed by the board in August of this year. A series of other steps, administrative steps, essentially took place there, and ultimately, as I say, the purchase and sales was signed. One of the things we wanted to do also was to confirm that the property didn't have any environmental issues. So the firm of GeoInsight was hired to come in and conduct a Phase 1 environmental assessment, which they did. That essentially constitutes taking a look at the property, not only the church property, but the property around the St. Dorothy's property. There's DEP has a listing of properties that have been identified have had either 21E issues or various contamination issues. So they looked at that information, also obtained some information about the number of underground storage tanks in that proximity. Came back and indicated that there wasn't anything apparent that would signal a problem, but suggested to essentially be on the safe side that we take a further step, which was to authorize them to install some groundwater monitoring wells to check not only the soil but also the contents of the groundwater and the groundwater flow. So GEO was authorized to do that. There were 3 test wells that were set largely along the Main Street area, close to the Main Street area, and then over towards the church proper. And ultimately, after the test results came back, they were negative for any reportable contaminants. So clearly, that's good news, because the last thing we want to do is acquire a piece of property that has contamination issues. In addition, the board and I felt that it would be advisable to obtain an appraisal on this property, just to get a sense and to confirm that the price that we were prepared to recommend to town meeting was a reasonable price. And as a result, I brought in a licensed appraiser, Phyllis D. Cristoforo, and she conducted a appraisal of the property and came back and indicated that based upon comparables, the market value of this property is between approximately $1,850,000 and $1.9 million. So given the price that we were able to negotiate here, we're very comfortable that it's a reasonable price. In terms of the rationale, there is no immediate use that we have in mind for this property. There are a number of issues that I believe the town will need to address over the years. One being an admin, town admin, school admin building at some point. We continue to hear from some of the sporting groups that they're looking for field space. Some of that may be addressed in some manner with the Yentile property, but that's another issue that's out there. I think the Elderly Services Center is another location that at some point we may need to look at expanding. There's been talk for a number of years now about looking for additional space for the cemetery. The fire substation is another issue that's been talked about. So not that any one of those particular uses would be targeted for this particular space, but it does point to the fact that there are a number of issues over the longer term, 5 or 10 years here, that the town is going to need to address. And these types of opportunities where you've got a piece of prime real estate in a good location don't come up all that often. So it's certainly my judgment that it's advisable to purchase this property now, given the fact that this property is buildable in a prime location. To wait, if we could get a piece of property like this in the future, it's going to cost more. So the other point I would also make is that this property, where it is non-taxable currently, if the town meeting members do vote to acquire it, we're not taking taxable property off the tax roll. So I think that's favorable as well.
Also, it's your intention that this all comes out of free cash, so it doesn't go in the tax rate, no borrowing or anything else?
That's right. That's certainly the other important point about this. The town has been very diligent about putting money away in reserve. And as you probably know from the recent certification from the Department of Revenue, the town's free cash number is now at $14,199,000. We would plan to pay for the full amount from available funds, free cash. And really that is one of the reasons why we take the efforts that we do to make sure we have a reserve, not only to deal with the economic downturns when state aid becomes more limited, but also to seize upon these kind of opportunities that don't happen all that often. So that's really the basis for this, and I guess if there are any questions, I'd certainly be willing to address them.
Yes, sir.
Is there a representative here from the Archdiocese tonight?
No.
My question, you can answer it. The property was put out to bid. I put a bid on the property substantially higher than the town. I know the Archdiocese can sell who they want to, but what was the purpose of them selling this land in the first place? Why now?
I think you really have to talk to a representative from the Archdiocese. I don't have any specifics on why they're looking to sell. I was just, quite honestly, thrilled with the opportunity to...
I had always heard that it was to settle lawsuits, which is why
That's- yeah,
I've done the same thing in Woburn and other towns. They've sold off land.
I wasn't given any details as to what was motivating them to sell the property.
Any other questions? From the board? No? We'll adjourn the meeting. The Finance Committee will now go into their own meeting to vote on these 3 articles. Good night. Thank you.